delighted to welcome all of you here this morning, and I would like to introduce Jay Hart, who is going to be our MC this morning. Jay is the current chairman of the Economic Leadership Alliance. He's a director on the Chamber Board of Directors, and he's a past chairman of the Chamber. Jay?
Thank you. I haven't heard you speak yet. I want to welcome you to this Community Leaders Summit. Our summits have been held since 2007, and a lot of you in this room are probably a part of those summits back in those days. And they included topics such as the Piper aircraft retention, which at that time was really a hot topic. Piper was looking to leave, and a lot of us got together and said, gee, what can we do to keep them here? They're pretty important to this community. And they are here, and Simon Caldicott's here, and CEO of Piper, great community partner, great guy on the Chamber Board. Simon, thanks for all you do. And we're able to keep these guys here. Largest private sector employer in the county. Also included economic development, our competitiveness in attracting new employers, and the Indian River Lagoon, to name a few. So we tried to pick topics of real importance at those points in time, bring people together, talk about those things, present information to inform people so that we could address those with a base of knowledge. As with all of our past Community Leaders Summits, we believe it's important to provide our local leaders with opportunities to meet, to get the facts firsthand on issues facing Edinburgh County and Florida. In fact, we're going to be recording this summit today, and we're going to post it on our website. It's going to be posted on the City of Vero Beach website, and it's going to be posted on the county's website. So that this information is going to be out to the public for them to look at firsthand and be able to make their own decisions on the information that was presented. The summits are by invitation only. They're topic focused. The summits have historically not been open to the media, and it's not that type of event. This is not a media type event. We've had calls and emails asking us to allow reporters here to cover this summit, and we stuck by our decision that summits are private, by invitation only, and held in a private facility rented by the Chamber. It's a benefit for Chamber members and community leaders, and that's why we do these. While we invite local media executives to this function, because they are two local leaders, and many of them are, we ask if they decide to be here with us, they respect our decision. At this time, let's please stand for a moment of prayer and the pledge of allegiance. Yes. God, thank you for this opportunity for us to be here today. Let us use our time today with the best interest of our community in mind. Let us openly share ideas that will move our community forward and guide us into the future. We come forward giving thanks for the strengths of each individual in this group. Together, grant us the ability to achieve as a whole much more than we can individually. Amen. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll take just a moment to recognize some of our local officials. I'm going to ask the audience to please hold applause until we're finished with introductions. From Representative Bill Pose's office, David Jackson. Thanks for being here. I saw you guys everywhere. From Senator Joe Negron's office, Andrea Robatelli. Thank you for being here. From our Edinburgh County Commission, Commissioner Peter O'Brien. Peter, thank you for being here. Commissioner Joe Flesher. See Joe. Okay. Commissioner Bob Solari. I know Bob's here. County Director of Public Works, Chris Mora. Chris, thanks for being here. Edinburgh County Supervisor of Elections, Leslie Swan. Leslie's here. Edinburgh County Sheriff Darrell Laura. Is Darrell here? I know Jeff's here. No. Okay, Jeff shaking his head no. But we do have Jeff Luther, Director of Governmental Affairs and Media Relations. Jeff, thanks for being here. From the City of Ellesmere, City Manager Jason Unmaker. Commission, thanks for being here. City of Sebastian, Councilwoman Andrea Cole. Andrea, thanks for being here. City Manager Joe Griffin. Is Joe here? Okay. You can watch the video.
Yeah, on Sebastian.
That's good. Oh, good.
Yeah,
We're going to put it on Sebastian too.
that's what Andrea said.
Very good. We're going to put it on Sebastian's Chamber's website as well.
And the city council.
And the City Council website. Very good. Let's see. City of Vero Beach, we've got City Manager Joe O'Connor. I saw Jim. Jim, thanks for being here. Public Works Director Monty Falls. I know Monty's here. Take my name. I like Monty's haircut. Love it. We got the same barber, Monty. Chairman, City's High Speed Rail Commission, Ken Day. I know Ken's here. Thanks for being here, Ken. As you know, the proposed All Aboard Florida project has been a topic of local discussion. Some people have a lot of knowledge about the topic, while others are still learning about the project and have just joined in the conversation. At this time, I want to introduce and thank our speaker, Rusty Roberts, for being with us today. As Vice President of Corporate Development, Rusty Roberts is responsible for engaging stakeholders involved with Florida East Coast Industries capital projects, including local, state, and federal agencies. His involvement spans across Florida's East Coast industries and its subsidiary companies, including Flagler, a full-service commercial real estate company, All Aboard Florida, the United States' first privately owned passenger rail company, South Florida Logistics Services, an integrated logistics company, and Parallel Infrastructure, a right-of-way management and development company. Mr. Roberts brings more than 30 years of legislative and political management experience. He served as Chief of Staff for Congressman John L. Micah, who also chaired the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and Congresswoman Leanna Ross-Layton. I did right. Mr. Roberts spent the past 2 years as Managing Director of the Transportation Infrastructure Practice of BGR Government Affairs, a top Washington, D.C. lobbying firm. He represented such high-profile clients as the Association of American Railroads, JetBlue Airways, Toyota, and the Outdoor Advertising Association. His private sector experience includes serving as the federal lobbyist for Miami-Dade County, Private Affairs Director for Capital Bank, and Executive Director of Miami Baseball, Inc. Rusty attended the University of South Florida and University of Miami, University College?
University of Maryland.
University of Maryland. I'm trying to give you more credit than you're due. I love the ACC. I'm sorry, Russ. Go ahead. If you get to know me well enough, you'll know all of this.
You're forgetting.
I'll always throw one of those in. Rusty, come on up, take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me here. I'll trip over it or something like that. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak to you about this project. And I appreciate all the elected officials who are in the room here today to learn about it, because you're the conduit to your constituents and the citizenry. And I've had the pleasure of meeting with many of you, sometimes on more than one occasion. Appreciate Ms. Coy, you coming up here down here from Sebastian. Been up there a couple times and spoke to the council. I had met with Commissioner Solari yesterday. We had the president of our company in town for a few meetings. It was fun, Commissioner.
Absolute fun.
And try to explain the project and answer questions. And so what I want to try to do today is explain the project to you folks in this room and give you our perspective and maybe hopefully clear some of the fog or clear up some of the myths that are being discussed with regard to the project. I'll try and be quick so that we can get to questions and answers, because I know there's going to be plenty, and I'm happy to take on all the questions. And so some of you have seen this presentation before. It's a little bit different, but it's still just as boring as it was the first time you saw it. So I won't try to get depth by PowerPoint and try to make it a little bit relevant to Indian River County. I have this first slide about great economies require great infrastructure, and I think I just like that line because every economy was formed around some sort of transportation corridor. Transportation corridors are the lifeblood of any economy, whether it was waterways in the beginning, whether it's roads, whether it's railroads. And so this coast here, the Treasure Coast, and all along the east coast of Florida is a perfect example of that saying, because the Florida East Coast Railway, Henry Flagler's railway, was really responsible for much of the development along the east coast of Florida. As you know, it's an over 100-year-old asset, and we're very proud to have that asset. And I'm going to have to walk around, I think, because this is not, oops. Okay, sorry, I guess I just have to move a little bit. So, All Aboard Florida is connecting two major population centers, that would be Central Florida and South Florida. I mentioned Henry Flagler. I just want to show this slide because I think it's kind of fun. 1890, when Henry Flagler came to Florida, this was the population in Florida at that time. 390,000. Key West was the biggest city most people know in those days. And then we come to today, where we probably already surpassed, I don't know, we'll have to wait for some sort of census update. New York is the third largest state in Florida. And we're growing, we're continuing to grow. The Florida Chamber of Commerce estimates that there'll be 6 million new residents in Florida by 2030. And so we have to prepare for that. And I think at least half of them want to live in Indian River County, I'm told. So we need to be prepared for that. We need to be prepared to figure out how to get people moving around the state. And that is what this company is trying to do. I must have skipped a slide. I had a company chart up there, but most people know. I'm just going to go real fast. Florida East Coast Industries, you mentioned it in the introduction, is the legacy company of Henry Flagler. This company that's running it now bought the railroad in 2007, so we've been in charge of the railroad since 2007. I want to make sure people know that. But we still have Henry Flagler's assets, have kept most of them in place, and are operating the businesses. So what is this train? It's a train from Miami to Orlando, basically, with 2 intermediate stops. Everybody knows that. We are connecting 2 economic powerhouses in the state, Central Florida and South Florida. A large part of the economy of the state, as we all know, and including this county, depends on tourism. In Orlando, that number is really long. I think it's wrong. I think it was 57 million visitors they had last year to the city of Orlando, the most visited city in America. And South Florida is certainly got at least 40 million visitors. 39 million people came from Miami Airport. I don't know how many came from through Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach Airport. So there's a significant market in these 2 cities. Tourists, just tourists. I'm not talking about residents of Florida. Tourists who come to visit our state. They want to see the beaches. They want to see the theme parks. They want to do fishing. They want to do enjoy all the amenities that this state has to offer. And I think that if this state is not prepared for the continued growth of tourism, and the state of Florida, Visit Florida, is hoping that we reach the 100 million mark in terms of visitors to Florida within the next year. If we're not prepared to accommodate those visitors and offer them ways to get around the state, then we're going to kill the golden goose, which is Florida. And that is our lifeblood of our economy, tourists who visit us. The reason why we don't have a state income tax. And so we think that the All Aboard Florida project, which is restoring what used to be on this railroad, passenger rail, is going to be an important component to that mobility option that we give people. So we have several success factors that we talk about that are fairly well known to folks who are following the program. Because we mentioned that it is a private sector project, privately owned company, privately operated project, and it will be funded privately. And I'll get into the nuances of that, of course, if someone was going to ask me. But one of the reasons why we can build the system for the price point that we estimate is going to cost, which the most advertised amount is $1.5 billion, but it will be more than that, is the fact that we own the corridor, and we've owned it free and clear for 100 years. And so that is a very, very valuable corridor. We don't have to go buy right away. We don't have to put in brand new infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure is there. That is why it makes this project so commercially viable. As opposed to California, which is buying right away. It's going to cost them $68 billion was the last estimate to build a high-speed rail in that state. One of the others, the model, is the fact that we're offering people a 3-hour trip between Central Florida and South Florida. Very important to the success of the train is a sweet spot to get people out of their car and onto a train, or out of an airplane onto a train. It's 4 or 5 hours, they're going to fly. It's 2 hours, they're going to drive. And we're using a brand new technology that so far has not been used in the United States. It's going to be diesel engines, but it's going to be the cleanest, what they call EPA Tier 4 diesel engines available in the market today. Another success factor, if this thing works, is the fact that the plan that we built. In the initial phase that we're planning to build, we're building what I call just basically a simple but executable plan, and that is that Miami to Orlando route that gets people there in 3 hours and that is reliable. We're connecting the 2 economic hotspots, as I mentioned. These are areas of critical mass in terms of population. These are where the riders are that's going to make this project commercially viable. And another important success factor is that convenience. So we're providing hourly service starting at 6 a.m. That hourly service is very, very important to people to get in your mindset that you have an option to go from Central to South Florida or vice versa, knowing that if you were wanting to fly, you'd go on the website and you say, gee, when is the next American Airlines flight to Miami, or the other way around? It might be 3 o'clock, might be 6 o'clock, might be 8 o'clock tonight. I might as well drive. Here, you know that you can go to the airport, train station, and get on the train, arrive 15 minutes before, and get on the train and go. It's all reserved seating, so you can go to the ticket window and reserve a seat right there, or do it online. But you know, within an hour, you can go to where you need to go. And that is one of the what I call hallmark success. That is one of the factors that we have to put into the system. If we were to operate from these 2 cities to South Florida, I'll call South Florida a city if you don't mind, and Orlando, that kind of service. When we start talking about service up here, it's going to be different, of course, but the ridership numbers in those areas demand that kind of service, and that is what will pull people out of the car and onto the train. We think it's going to be a very successful business model. Also, what makes it successful is the fact that the market that we have here in Florida, which is so unique as compared to other parts of the country. There are great city pairs all over the country that might support intercity passenger rail, whether public or private. Houston and Dallas, they're talking about a privately built system there. Atlanta to Charlotte, other cities I can't think of. But none of those places have what we have, and that is the tourist market when it comes to Florida, the tourists that visit Florida. So we're not building a passenger train just for everybody in this room or everybody in South Florida who lives there or everybody who lives in Central Florida. We're building it for 3 distinct groups of people, and that is a large component of those are the tourists. And I'm going to switch here, if I can, to our market. And you've probably seen this slide half a dozen times, but the numbers don't change. We did an investment-grade ridership study. We studied this system very, very carefully. Spent a lot of money, spending a lot of time trying to figure out, do we have a market that we can serve? Will they get on the train? Who might ride it? Well, tourists are going to be riding it for the most part. And you can see from this chart, we're going to get a large group of tour groups, leisure tour groups that come through Florida. Tour packaging companies, tour promoters in Europe and Latin America are already looking at this system as to build into their packages when people visit Florida, so that they have an opportunity to not only visit the beaches, but also go to the theme parks. We'll extend people's stay in Florida. We'll probably grow tourism. We think we'll grow tourism, but we will certainly, if we don't do that, we will certainly extend people's stay in Florida. And Americans take the shortest vacations. Europeans and Latin Americans, they take longer vacations, and they'll have an opportunity to see more of Florida and leave more of their money behind. We're going to have, of course, just regular non-group family travelers who are visiting Florida, and of course, people traveling on their own. We expect to have a fairly robust number of business travelers. I think we have 26% there. I think that number will grow pretty quickly as people figure out this is a better way to go. If you're in Orlando, go to Miami for meetings, you're back and forth. A better way to go than driving, because at least you can keep your iPad open, you can work, and you can make phone calls And then the other group is going to, it's not in that pie chart, but that would fall into maybe the leisure section versus the business section. And those are folks who just live in Florida who want to go back and forth for whatever reason. I want to spend the day in Miami, I want to spend the day in Orlando, I want to go to Miami Heat game, Orlando Magic game, those kinds of things. So we counted, when we tried to estimate the movement, when we studied the movement of people between Central and South Florida, we actually found nearly 500 million trips a year, 500 million trips a year. That's an astonishing number. Now, we had to pare that down because that's not really realistic to think about that. So we looked at travelers who might be within 15, 20 minutes of our stations. And that's, our stations are downtown or near hotels area, and that's where the tourists are anyway. So we came up with a number of about 50 million trips between Central and South Florida a year of the market that we can catch, our marketable audience. And we only need to get in the single digits percentage-wise to make this a commercially viable project. The company thinks they can do it. They've studied and restudied the numbers. We had our studies restudied with peer reviews, and they're fairly confident that this unique area will support this privately funded train. Operational details, I've sort of said it, but I'll go into it again. Some of those relate to questions in this area. We have hourly service, northbound and southbound. First train will leave at 6 a.m. from each city and take you just under 3 hours to get to the end of the line to the opposite location. So that adds 32 trains through Indian River County a day, roughly one every half an hour. In South Florida, we have a Federal Railroad Administration speed limit of 79. We will be going 79 in several of the areas down there, but we're going slower because we do have 2 station stops, so you accelerate and decelerate the stop. North of West Palm Beach, we have a speed limit of 110. We will be going 110 in many areas. We will be going slower in areas too. That's been a curvature, certain topography, which most of it's flat anyway. But and certainly in this area, in Indian River County, there will be sections there we will be going at the 110 miles per hour. Once we leave get into Brevard County and get to Cocoa, we make a left turn to the airport. That's where we go to 125 miles per hour. That gets us in a 3-hour window and makes it a very interesting ride, mind you. For, 40 years, you've been seeing freight trains go by here every day, and so everybody has a notion of the impact of a train through this community. And please know that a freight train and a passenger train are entirely different animals. So when you see a passenger train go by here, you're going to see a very, very short train. You're going to see, you're going to hear a lighter train. You're going to hear a quieter train, and you're going to have almost zero vibration from that train as it goes by. So your building will not fall down, any as a result of the additional passenger trains going by. A freight train is up to 2 miles long. That 7,800 feet is kind of a short, long freight train. They can get longer than that. What's a mile? 5,280 feet. So there you go. They can be that long. And so a freight train takes a long time to go through a crossing, and of course it's jockeys around, it makes a lot of noise, a lot of vibration, and so the passenger train is not 1,000 feet long, because our platforms are 1,000 feet long, so 900 feet is about the length, the maximum length we are going to go on our train. And that, as I said, is very, very light because the equipment is very different. We don't have all that heavy freight load, that weight that's on a freight train. Both trains can run very easily on the same tracks because they are designed for the heavier freight. As I mentioned, this is a private investment. It's very unique. It's the only project underway in the United States at this point. There's another startup, as I mentioned, Dallas, Houston, that is underway. They'll be using Japanese technology, and they'll be going faster than we are going. And so we think that, and what we're doing is probably hasn't been tried in the United States in almost 40 years. Henry Flagler's passenger railroad put in this train in this tracks in 1968, and so it's been a long time since we've seen passenger trains go by, unless you've seen FEC private rail cars go by once in a while. But that's it on this corridor. I mentioned at the beginning of my talk that we're going to be solving mobility issues in the state. We're going to give an alternative way to get from A to B in the state for tourists and business people and residents alike. Our operation is going to be very important to business development and growth in the state. Ranch you particularly where we're stopping at this time, and that's in South Florida and Orlando. And really in South Florida, because in South Florida is where we own infrastructure, we're building infrastructure. In Orlando, we're only leasing space for a train station at the airport. But all along the corridor, we believe that this passenger train will be very vital to tourism in the state. And it's going to be very important to employment opportunities, particularly in construction, but also in ongoing operations. And those operations are going to have, that construction and operations are going to have significant impact on the state's gross domestic product and economic impact. During the construction phase, we expect our economic impact to be about $1 billion in GDP to the state of Florida increase. That's a $30 million economic impact in Indian River County in terms of construction activity. It'll bring about $82 million, probably more, but in that range, in economic impact, state and local tax revenues. We estimate at the minimum 20,000 construction jobs will be created by this project. And that's all along the corridor. That's just not Miami, that's just not Orlando, that's here in Indian River too. That's 350 construction jobs we expect that will be occurring in Indian River County. I'm going to blow through these fairly quickly because you all want to talk about Indian River County and most people know where we're stopping. Just want to make sure you understand that this is the Orlando Airport Station, and everybody, I think, knows we're going into Orlando Airport. I just want to make sure you understand how we're getting there, how that's being handled financially, and maybe in anticipating questions, answer them ahead of time. State Road 528, most folks in this room have probably traveled to Orlando to fly out. If you fly out to this is being your leisure travel, you're going to take the beach line to the airport. We are also taking the beach line to the airport. We are leasing the corridor, the southern side of the 528, mostly the southern side, but we're leasing. We have easement rights now along that corridor through an agreement with Florida DOT and the Orange County Expressway Authority. We come into the Orlando Airport, which was designed when that airport was built in the 70s, and a new terminal they're planning, designed in the 90s for rail easement and a high-speed rail station, which is what that little line is at the bottom. It says future intermodal facility. That is the center of a brand new terminal that Orlando Airport is planning, where they'll have 120 new gates. It'll be almost doubling the size of Orlando Airport with 120 new gates, and that new south terminal will be for international passengers. As I said, that was designed originally with a high-speed rail or an intercity passenger rail station in the middle of it. What we've done is gone to them and say, may we have access to the airport, and how much will it cost? And so that is the agreement that we've made with the airport to be the tenant in their intermodal facility, and we'll be one of 4 tenants in that intermodal facility. We'll be sharing that with Sunrail, which will go into the airport in the 3rd phase, which is their commuter rail. We'll be sharing it with the automated people mover that has to take people back and forth to the north and south terminal. We'll be sharing it with another train technology, possibly maglev, possibly light rail, magnetic levitation, that'll take people from the airport to the convention center on International Drive. 4 train sets will be in that intermodal station. We are leasing that space from the airport. Folks have read and they've said that the governor gave all over Florida a $200 million grant to build a train station in Orlando. That is simply not true. He did give the airport a grant to build an intermodal terminal that serves 4 different functions. We are one of the tenants. We're paying an annual lease to the airport for that space, and we're paying what is the equivalent of a passenger facility charge. That's what we call that for the airlines. When your part of your ticket has a $2 or $3 or $5, part of the ticket actually goes to the airport for capital expenses and construction. We will have to pay the same thing if you buy a ticket on a train. Part of that will go to the airport, plus an annual lease fee to the airport. They're not giving us a station, they're providing a shell, and we have to build it out. So we're renting a shell, and we're building it out at our expense, a train station. From Orlando Airport, of course, we we are heading, that's the rendering of the train station. We just walk over here real fast, sorry, no microphone. But All Aboard Florida kind of comes in from the south, Sunrail comes in up here, and then the other state, there'll be four sets of tracks in there for the All Aboard Florida and the other train stations will be in there. Parking garage, eventually there'll be 20,000 parking spaces in that area, 120 gates. It'll take a long time to build it out. From there though, we are heading east toward Cocoa along 528. You can see where we are. We're at Interstate 95, and you can see that where we cross Interstate 95. We're actually going over Interstate 95. Architecturally, it's going to be a sight to behold when that is built, when you're driving by. And then we're from the south side, we're moving to the north side of 528, and then we'll be curving around onto our corridor. As you can see there, we call it the Cocoa Curve. Quickly, that's West Palm Beach, 1,000-foot platform. That red area is the land we own. We'll be building a station there, probably a hotel and an office building. That's a transit-oriented development project for the company. Everything we're doing is intermodal, folks, by the way. So in Orlando, obviously, is intermodal. West Palm Beach is intermodal with the downtown trolley and the tri-rail. Fort Lauderdale is intermodal with their wave streetcar that they're building in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Similar footprint with a train station. And then also the bus system in Fort Lauderdale. This is Miami. That red area is the land that we own. We're building fairly significant transit-oriented development there, including office buildings, hotel. That's Henry Flagler's land. It's been in our company's hands since he owned it when he built the station in 1896 in downtown Miami. So that's where we're going to be. We're probably going to break ground on that a little bit later this year. We'll be breaking ground on the southern segment sooner than any other segment. I get anything to work. Folks, you have heard us talk about the EIS process that we're in the middle of, so I just want to quickly touch on that, and then I think we'll be done. And we have questions if you like. The environmental impact statement is part of the National Environmental Policy Act, so when people say we're doing a NEPA review, that's the EIS. That EIS is required as a result of the RIF loan that we've applied for. That is the Railroad Rehabilitation Improvement Fund, or financing it's called, RIF, which is a Federal Railroad Administration loan program for railroads to build infrastructure. We've applied for a loan, as most people know. So as a result of that loan, as a consequence of that loan, we have to do an environmental impact statement. That draft EIS is due very, very soon, and I left that blank because it's been a moving target. It was originally supposed to be out at sometime in February. To gather the data that EIS needs takes a long time. There are many, many cooperating agencies involved, including the Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Coast Guard, obviously the Federal Railroad Administration. They coordinate with local agencies. So that draft EIS is in the very final stages, and we hope it'll be out at the end of May. That's the latest word that we got from FRA at the end of May. We have no control over the environmental impact statement. We do not write it. We provide data that is requested to the FRA. They write it. We do not get to see it. When it is published, you will see it at the same time we see it. We will not get an advance copy. The EIS will study the impact on the human environment of this train, not only in South Florida and Central Florida, but all along the corridor. And so that'll discuss, it's not a big issue here, but it's in South Florida, some of the waterways are crossing. It'll discuss noise. It'll discuss any kind of mitigation that we should be required to do to minimize the negative impact on the community. The EIS will admit that there will be some negative impacts, and it will suggest and instruct us on certain mitigation factors. Not everything will be able to be solved, but there are always mitigations that a project like this must go through to do that. When the EIS is published, it will be put in the Federal Register, to be available for everyone to read. I'm sure that the cities and counties along the corridor will want to get hard copies and get ready. It will be a phone book. And so that kicks off a comment period that is standard time period is 45 days. And as far as we know right now, that will be a comment period. And so that also kickstarts a series of public input meetings that the FRA will manage, but we will schedule and we will staff. We will be in the 6 public input meetings in various areas along the corridor, and those will be scheduled as soon as the EIS is out. It'll be scheduled within that 45-day comment period and early in that 45-day comment period to allow people to come to, it'll be a room like this. This is a great place for a public input meeting, I think. And so learn about the train, we'll have maps and storyboards and videos and those kinds of things. Be able to ask questions. You'll be able to get a piece of paper and write your comment down, or you can email a comment, you can write a letter to the FRA. You have an opportunity to comment, favorable, unfavorable, things that you think that the EIS did not address that they should be addressing, all those kinds of things. Those public meetings will happen. The comments will be tabulated after the comment period closes, and they will. That tabulation will take probably a few months. What they do is they take all the comments, they put them in groups, they read every one, it becomes part of the public record, so when the final EIS comes out, it will say 30 people wrote to discuss, to express their concern about the speed of a train, or discuss a concern about a crossing, or whatever train noise, horn noise, that kind of thing. That all becomes part of the record. They take those comments into consideration. They come up with a final EIS, which is a record of decision. So some of the mitigations that we are required to perform in the draft may change in the final. That's why we have a public input period. And so when the draft comes out, that is not the end. That is not the cement is not dry for folks who are concerned about the process and the speed of the process. That is the beginning of the public give and take, which we've got a head start on that, I think, haven't we? That is the end of my presentation. I probably skipped over a couple things that people have questions about, and I'll be happy to address them. And I thank you very, very much for your very polite attention. Thank you.
In South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. So wherever we do them, they'll be situated such that it'll be very easy, short travel for everybody. We're trying to space them to make it convenient for everybody to attend. I don't think we'll be doing one in every county. The FRA only requires, I think, 3 or 4. Can't remember. Right now we're planning 6. It has not been decided where we're doing in Treasure Coast, if we're doing 1 or 2. I don't know. But everybody knows that Indian River would like to be right here. Trust me.
Thank you.
I tell them all the time.
Good, thank you. Well, that question was so important that I'm going to reiterate the fact that we truly don't want our people to have to travel up a zillion miles to make comment. Please, I'm overemphasizing because it's so important that we get our input, and we're often left out of the process. Please, I'll zip it.
We're going to make great efforts to make sure that you don't have to go a zillion miles, maybe half of a zillion.
No, not acceptable. It's just not.
Go ahead. Yes.
My biggest concern is the size of the market.
Yes.
Because my research indicates that it's mainly business people that take high-speed trains because of the cost, and that those business people now are flying. But if you provide a train that is comparable, they will consider the train. Now, currently, there's only 14 flights a day between the cities you're serving, and that would be 2,100 seats. You're going to add 12,800 seats a day. How are you going to increase your demand by 600%, 700%?
Most of the people who travel north and south go by car. There is a market there.
But at what price?
It'll be extremely competitive. Obviously, if we're charging more than it's going to cost you to fly or drive, that doesn't make much business
Well,
sense.
a tank of gas is $40, $50. I don't think you can put 4 people on your train for that.
Well, we're going to be very competitive with all modes of travel. We know we have to do that to get the riders, but we also know that there's a value to the convenience.
I agree. I mean, I would love to see the train work, but I just don't see how you can charge a fee that is going to attract passengers and still break even.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's great to have doubt, and from where you're sitting, I can see where that is a very reasonable perception. The studies we did were very, very in-depth. I call it, we got into the weeds of how people travel. We had people sitting at turnpike plazas and rest stops asking questions. We we really dug deep into the travel habits of everybody. We studied other systems around the world, and that's very important because there's a lot of folks who say, why do you think you could be a success? Because no transportation system in the world makes a profit. That's simply not true. In many of the lines in Europe are making very good money, especially the Eurostar, which is between London and Paris, which has pretty much put the airlines out of business, the shuttles out of business. If Acela were more efficient between New York and Washington, there'd be less flights. It's good, but it's not as efficient as it could be. Their version of high speed is an average of something like 80 miles an hour. They only get to a high speed rate of speed very, very shortly. The Acela, standalone, and the Metroliners in Washington, standalone, make an operational profit, but they subsidizes, as well as Congress subsidizes, the rest of the system all over the country.
I know that, but they charge between 159 and...
They charge a lot of money because the airlines are charging much more money than you're going to pay from Miami to Orlando, one. So you're going to charge as much as you can get away with. But also, the market on those trains are almost all business people. And they're going to pay those high prices.
Right.
Good question, thanks. We got a question over here? Yeah.
Yeah, Leslie, when you say we're going to have public hearings on EIS down in Palm Beach and Lauderdale, Miami, my understanding is they've already completed an environmental assessment for those counties.
Correct.
And EIS is only going to cover the 3 northern counties. And so why would we have public hearings down there if the EIS is only going to cover our county?
So in South Florida, we had the FRA conducted, what's the term I want to think about it, EIS Light. It's called an environmental assessment. That is a study that is designed for a project that they determined might not have a huge impact, so they don't need to go through a full-blown EIS. They studied those 3 counties, the corridor, because it's in a corridor that's been disturbed, it's been used for 100 years, it is an ongoing transportation corridor. We're not putting a new type of service, we're putting in rail, so it's been used rail, so they did not need to do a complete EIS. What we left out of the environmental assessment was some of the bridges. What they left out was some of the bridges, like the New River, St. Lucie River. So the waterway studies were not part of the environmental assessment. The reason why we have an EIS here is mainly because of the Cocoa curve from Cocoa to Orlando. Not because we're going through Indian River County, because it's the same thing. We're in a disturbed corridor that's been operating rail for years. We're still operating rail. So if we were just to do Indian River County or the Treasure Coast, it might be another EA. But we're laying 35 miles of new track through preserves and virgin land north of here. So that requires a more in-depth EIS. Plus, all the bridges along the way, including the Sebastian River Bridge, which is going to be rebuilt, replaced. And we're replacing several other bridges along the way as well. So I don't know if I explained that properly. So we left some of those South Florida bridges out of the EA. So we have to do, and also, I'm sorry, Don, we are building stations down there on our property. We're doing major construction. So we have to do hearings in those areas because we're still impacting that area, especially with the rivers. I don't know that we're going to do one in every county, and another team that works with the FRA in the EIS process is deciding where there's going to be. FRA is leading the charge on that.
Thank you, good question. Beth?
Could you expand a little bit on the $30 million economic impact to Indian River County?
So it's, she wants to know that we describe or elaborate on that impact to Indian River County, or the economic impact of the state of Florida, Indian River County. So when we start construction on the infrastructure, the laying of the track, because we'll be double tracking along almost all the corridor. We're not going to start in Miami and move north with construction teams. We're going to descend on the corridor pretty much at the same time. And we'll be letting contracts all along this 235-mile corridor. We'll be letting contracts. So we have major construction companies, obviously big national companies doing this because of the scope of the work is so massive. All of those companies have to hire local subcontractors. And they'll be hiring subcontractors looking for employees along every mile of this corridor in every county. We're not going to be bringing labor up from Dade County to work in Indian River County to help lay rail infrastructure. We're going to look locally wherever we are. So those we will be able to find enough labor. It's going to be difficult as it is. Those subcontractors and those major contractors will be looking for employees all along the corridor, and that's so that impact is obviously on their salaries and then the money they spend in the community.
Gee, okay, let's get this gentleman right here. Go ahead, since you're standing.
Thank you. You say you have great infrastructure. Your first slide. Everybody knows the extent that that infrastructure is about 120 years old. And you're trying to use it unchanged and put 21st century technology on it. I have some friends, corridors that you mentioned, Boston, New York, Washington, Long Island Railroad, Philadelphia to Harrisburg, and those railroads I just mentioned are about 535 miles long, put them all together. And there are 5 grade crossings, one every 150 miles. I think you have grade crossings, one every half mile. 325 grade crossings every half mile at average. And I'm just wondering if there's any thought of mitigation, safety issue, not like storms or gates, but overpasses and underpasses.
My goodness, safety has to be our #1 concern. It's the beginning of my answer.
The railroads have solved it with four grade crossings and 4 500 miles.
Safety is going to be a #1 concern. The FRA and the Florida DOT are going to ensure that as well. So you talked about underpasses and overpasses. We'd be happy to have roads go over our railroad tracks and to get rid of, make it not necessary to have so many grade crossings. Cities and counties are welcome to do that. We don't build roads. They have to go over our railroad. We would not build a road. So if you want that to happen, the cities or the counties who own those roads are going to have to study that and pay for that. That's what was done in the corridor you're just talking about. When you say we're using a very old corridor, that is true. When we finish building out this corridor, we're going to have a brand new corridor. We're laying new track, where some of the track that is existing is being replaced and actually moved, so we can accommodate 2 tracks. Every crossing is going to undergo major safety upgrades, and so appropriate to the type of service we'll be running. So this will be a totally modern system. What we're doing is modernizing this very, very old railroad corridor, and we're going to make it something that is very appropriate for the 21st century, as you say.
I mean, the gentleman quite sure.
Yes, sir.
Yes, on the same slide, I don't know what Beth said, because there's 350 jobs that are coming. Those are all construction related, or will there be any long-term economic benefit?
Those are construction figures. I didn't really pull up anything that we've studied with regard to operational, especially here, because in this particular initial phase of the system we're building, obviously we're not going to have an operation here in terms of station stops. But this is a phased program. We think this will be a success. We presume it will be a success. When we are sure that it's a success, we call it a proof of concept, if you will. If we prove this concept, then we'll start looking at other areas that we can serve, and that's along here, but that's other areas of the state as well. We don't want to stop with this particular system.
Excuse me, Michael, come back to you. Jump right here.
Yes, I certainly appreciate the presentation, and you acknowledge that there is some skepticism about the feasibility of this.
Sure.
And you've made a powerful argument about why you think it is going to be feasible. But there's the old saying, have you really put your money where your mouth is? And it seems to me that there are 2 ways you can do that. One is by having substantial equity in the cost of this undertaking.
And the second is to have collateral. Now, I read in the paper that collateral will be pledged. But my question is that collateral going to be, are you going to be pledging the right-of-way, which of course requires the involvement of another entity, because Oliver doesn't own the right-of-way. Is that going to be up for grabs so that if this thing does fail and the federal government can take over, are they going to take over not just a passenger system, but a freight service system?
So let me get to the financing and the equity. We have now and will have substantial equity in the project. We have, that is in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars of just our cash. That is to the tune of hundreds of million dollars in value of our assets. The total cost of the project is going to be over $2 billion. It's just not the 1.5 billion figure you have seen, because that's really the cost of the infrastructure. We have more to do. We have pledged collateral back to the RIF loan. That collateral is being studied now by an independent financial analyst. So the Federal Railroad Administration manages the loan program, but they don't decide on the creditworthiness of the loan. They contract with a private company, obviously a financial management type firm or accounting firm. In our case, it's one of the largest in the world. Who are studying the loan application. They will, and they have all of our documents. They have our entire business plan. They have all our financial statements, and they have the information on the collateral that we're pledging, of course. And they will decide whether we have a sound business plan and whether we have pledged an appropriate amount of capital. The holding company that owns all aboard Florida owns the right-of-way. That right-of-way has three purposes, and those are easements. Those are right to use, and the value in that property is just not the land; it's how it's being used. So, the value of your particular land is different depending on whether there's a house on it, or there's a 7-Eleven, or there's a Walmart. Okay, it's how that land is used. This land is being used in three different ways. Freight. There's a freight easement. Florida East Coast Railroad has. There's a passenger easement that all aboard Florida has rights to. Those easements have value. And then there's a third easement, it's right-of-way management, which is a company we own called Parallel Infrastructure that manages the tracks you can lay cable down at fiber optics, pipelines, billboards, that kind of thing. They have the right to lease that land to those we call pipe and wire activity. So there are three values to that corridor. That value and the rail we're putting down is being pledged as collateral. Again, it's up to the FRA's independent financial analysts whether they think that's good enough, and they will decide. And if they will either say yes or that's no. And if they say no, they won't even tell us why, but they will say yes or no. And that process is underway. So this is and by the way, we don't get to choose who analyzes the loan, but we have to pay for it. So the FRA is the EIS, by the way, we have to pay for. We don't get to choose who writes the EIS. So far, the taxpayer is not paying any money for this because we've had to pay to write the EIS, and we have to pay to have our loan analyzed. So I don't know when the last time you went to a bank to borrow money, but if you had to pay for them to decide whether you had a good loan or not, I don't think that happened, but we're doing that. We will also pay a substantial credit risk premium as part of the loan, which will be decided by the financial analyst.
So I gather from your statement that yes, all of the assets will be pledged.
The land under the stations, too, is part of the pledge. We own land, especially downtown Miami, it's 9 acres of pretty
So
valuable.
that's all going to be
Yes, sir.
bundled together, even though they're under ownership or control of different entities.
Those easements, those easement rights have value, and those are being pledged. So that part,
Let me cover on this side. Keith, let me get my clock. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. What is the federal agency action that is to be addressed under the EIS record of decision? To elaborate, you indicated earlier that the EIS is required by virtue of the federal law.
oh, sure.
That implies that the decision by the federal agency, FRA, is to whether or
won't decide whether to issue a loan, another department decides whether to issue a loan. But let me just point out the EIS. But for our loan application, you would not have an opportunity to provide any input on this project. If we did not apply for the federal RIF loan, tomorrow, without asking anybody in this room, without asking any federal agency, we can plop 10 train sets on those tracks and run them up and down and haul people up and down. We do not have to do an EIS to operate passenger service on this train, on these tracks. The freight railroad, if tomorrow they wanted to add 10 more trains because business is really good, they don't have to ask anybody. And so because we've applied for a federal loan, we have to do the EIS. So I don't want to say thank us, but what I want to say is you, the public, as a consequence of that, the public has an opportunity to weigh in. And we went into this knowing that, accepting that, and ready to respond to it. I think that's what we're trying to do.
Keith?
Two-part question was, I have read where trains could be running as early as 2016. Listening to the presentation today, it seems the infrastructure and the trains can, you give us a date when you expect the trains to actually be running. And the second part of the question is, in the business plan, if you include Brevard as part of the Treasure Coast, the current Florida census has us at about 1.2 million people. Highly demographic type of person that does travel. But do you have a future phase plan or a stop in the Treasure Coast region?
So let me answer that question in this way, if I can. Every community in along this corridor, Indian River County, Brevard County, combine them, Martin, St. Lucie, of course, every community has a great argument for a station stop. And we want to listen to those arguments. What we want to do first, though, is build this initial system, because this is what I've described as the only system that's going to be commercially viable. It's not commercially viable to do multiple stops in Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, or Brevard, or any combination of those at this point with the type of service we offering, and that's that hourly service and a 3-hour ride, because a 3-hour ride is very important to lure people onto the train. So what we need to do is, one, prove that we're right. Get our ridership to the levels that we are comfortable with, and then start looking at the next phase, which is where we're going to stop next. At that point, we'll look to Vero Beach and Indian River, and we'll maybe look at ridership. We might ask the county to come to us with ridership studies they may have done, a potential ridership. How many people are going to the airport every day to catch a plane? How many people want to go to Miami to watch a Heat game? Those kinds of studies have to be done. And then we'll do that in other counties, so the counties may do it for us. We'll look at then adding stops, but it won't be ours, because the market isn't the same here as it is in South Florida. So we would offer a different type of service that would be appropriate to the ridership that we think that there is. Okay, so, as I said, we don't want to stop here, but we have to eat the elephant a bite at a time.
The second part was, when did the trains?
We definitely expect to be in service sometime in 2016. We don't even have a firm date on that. But that in large infrastructure construction projects like this, deadlines move.
Okay, so Keith, could you repeat your question? He doesn't have to answer it again for the video. I don't think they could hear you.
Will y'all ask a question? Can you please project your voices?
Well, I'll tell you what the question was. When do we expect to have ridership? When do the train expect to be operating? And would we look at future stops in this area?
Thank you.
I think Mr. Zimmerman over here.
Thank you for coming. Your presentation was excellent. I did hear you say one thing, though. I heard you say, and I appreciate your having admitted this, that not all of the impacts will be positive. And that was good to hear you say that. And I'm very curious if you will give us a frank answer about what impacts you believe specifically for Indian River County, will be the non-positive impacts. What's your assessment of what the non-positive impacts are for this county specifically?
And I think an impact, whether it's positive or negative, is going to be dependent on the individual observer. So the impact on this county, there will be an impact in this county, and I think a positive impact, and then there'll be an impact of
maybe initially won't appreciate. First of all, this county along the entire corridor is going to be a completely upgraded corridor. Brand new corridor, and every crossing in this county is going to be pretty much brand new. So the counties and cities share in the cost of maintaining those crossings. And so what we're doing is taking your used car and saying no need to put new tires on it, we're just going to buy you a new car. Because what the upgrades we're going to do in every crossing is going to get everybody a brand new crossing with all the latest technology, systems, sensing systems, tracking systems. It's called positive train control, to keep track of the trains and ensure their safety. And so that is a benefit to Indian River County and all the other counties along the way. The other impact is going to be the discussion of quiet zones, which no one's asked me about yet. But that is a discussion we have everywhere. Quiet zone, for those folks who haven't fully informed on that, is securing the intersections to the point where the conductor is not required to sound the horn when he's going through the crossing. I know that's a concern in this community, it certainly is in some of the southern communities. To be designated as a quiet zone by the Federal Railroad Administration, you have to do certain upgrades to the crossing in order to satisfy the FRA that we don't need to sound the horn anymore. It's safe enough. The safety upgrades we are going to do are going to really substantially bring every crossing that much closer to quiet zone status. We've had discussions with the city, had discussions with the High Speed Rail Advisory Commission in Vero Beach about how much it might cost for quiet zone. And that has to be studied by engineers and decide what we need to do. There are federal guidelines in that matter. But the safety upgrades we're going to be required to do are going to be more substantial than we thought at the beginning. So I think that all the counties, including and cities, including Vero Beach, are going to find their cost a lot lower should they decide to go with quiet zones. Right? We have to do safety upgrades. We don't have to do quiet zones because that's a city choice or a county choice. A city or county must apply. They have to do the paperwork. We're not allowed to do it. So that is a positive impact. The negative impact might have been the train, the sound, the horn sound, except there's an opportunity to silence that horn. So some people like train horns. So that's why I say it's up to each individual's perception. You know, we have a 235-mile construction project, and it's a pretty massive undertaking. It's going to be a game changer for Florida, we think. And I joke, Commissioner Solari, you'll appreciate this. I joke we have a 235-mile construction project, and I have a county commissioner every mile to deal with. So willing to do that. But there's a lot of information that people need. There's a lot of information we don't fully have yet because we're waiting on the environmental impact statement. It's a very fluid project.
All right, follow-up question. We're not going to start going back and forth too much, but go ahead.
It's pretty clear from the infrastructure improvements that these improvements will probably facilitate expansion of freight service as well as providing for passenger trains. Is that a fair observation?
No.
And could you explain to me why?
Yes. The freight service obviously has been operating for a long time. There are folks who have asked questions, are we really doing this in order to sort of I can't think of a better term, a backdoor way to improve the freight operation? The answer is no. The freight operation does not need all over Florida in order to improve their capacity or improve their ability to carry more freight. If the freight railroad wanted to go tomorrow to the Federal Railroad Administration and apply for RIF loan, they could do it. If we weren't around, if all over Florida never came into being, they could go FRA and apply for a loan to lay a new track because they might want 2 tracks. That's one thing. The other thing is, right now, the freight business is running about half the trains now that they ran 10 years ago, just before the recession. In that time period, the whole freight market has changed. So that's another reason why you're seeing less freight trains go by, because we're running less rock aggregate up north than we used to. That ebbs and flows. Well, we're not bringing too many goods up from South Florida because there's not a whole lot of manufacturing in South Florida. There's no exporting from South Florida into mid-America. Any exports they do is maybe going through the Port of Miami and going out. What this train is doing is bringing goods from north to south to Miami or Fort Lauderdale. Those containers you see are full. For every 3 trains full of containers, for every 3 containers that go south that is full, for every 4 containers that go south that's full, 3 of those come back empty. So we're bringing empty containers from south to north to reposition those containers. We are not, there's plenty of room on those trains the way they operate today to haul a lot more freight. The projected business from the Panama Canal is just prediction. Nobody really knows how the flow of goods is going to undertake itself. Whether they'll stop in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Savannah, Norfolk, Virginia, we really don't know what's going to happen. But the ability for FEC Railroad to haul more freight the way they're operating right now is strong. They don't need to add more trains. They have plenty of empty containers that bring goods up. That's what's moving on trains now is the containers. And you see them going by, they're double stacked instead of single. We can haul more stuff because it's double stacked containers. We don't have to add extra trains. And so, in the near term, even if the Panama Canal opens, I don't think you're going to see some sudden increase in freight traffic. Again, they don't need us to improve the infrastructure to build their service. They can do it all by themselves.
And this is a follow-up, and I'll let you go on this. But it will, these improvements, let's lay aside the demand question, which is a very legitimate point.
Yeah.
But capacity will not give you greater capacity to accommodate, if the demand is there, greater freight service.
Well, freight service runs pretty well on single track. They do sidings along the way for freight trains to move over a hold or something for another train. 10 years ago, it had double the number of trains now, and they did fine on one track. The second track we're putting is to accommodate passenger rail. That was a nice Freudian slip. Accommodate the passenger rail, and to make sure that the movement of trains is not impeded. So we're adding double track to make sure that passenger rails can go north and south, and freight trains can go north and south, and not block each other. And so we're just improving the flow of traffic. That's to accommodate the passenger rail.
But it would.
As a consequence, you can certainly say that, but it's not necessary.
All right, stay here. Any questions?
What do you think the EIS is going to cost you?
I have no idea.
So you haven't budgeted any number in there, any millions of dollars to figure that the EIS?
Oh, sure. The bean counters in our finance office know how much it's costing. I don't know.
Well, why wouldn't you go to private equity instead of going through this whole process and just say that you wouldn't need any improvements at all if you didn't go for a federal loan? Why would you bypass the EIS statement and just go to private equity?
We are in private equity. We have private investors. Again, we are raising hundreds of millions of dollars in private equity and private investment. Hundreds of millions of dollars in our own cash. It's a very expensive fund.
Any other? Thank you, Steve. Any other questions?
Quick question. I was noticing the news last night when Chartwell down in Palm Beach County is having big difficulties with kids reversing back and forth to school, back and forth for access. We put a fence up, we tear that down, we still use it, which causes a life-threatening situation. If that's happening with the Chartwell, what would happen with this 120 mile or 100 mile an hour train? That would be especially different area. We have different middle school kids going back and forth. That causes a big problem.
So he's asking about safety of people crossing the tracks in the middle of, not at a crossing, not at a crosswalk, but in the middle of the field or something crossing the tracks, and children's safety, especially near schools. I'm not aware of the situation in Tri-Rail, but I believe you with Tri-Rail. Yeah, I do. And so I don't know what the situation down there is with regard to fencing. I will tell you this, we will be, as part of our safety infrastructure, putting up fencing in many, many places along the corridor in order to stop those kinds of trespassing across the tracks, especially near schools, especially in downtown areas where there's a lot of foot traffic. We're going to want to protect people's lives and protect the corridor.
That's my point.
Yeah.
When you put this fence up 12 times, it's wire fence, and the kids big will get back up. They'll get a more permanent way, so they won't be able to.
Yeah, we will not be putting up that kind of cheap wire fencing. We're putting up something substantial that will protect people and direct them to cross at appropriate places. We're very conscious of schools that we go by. As a matter of fact, we'll be doing programs in schools, safety programs for kids. There's a program called Operation Lifesaver, a national program to teach safety around railroads. And they go into schools and we'll be partnering with them to go to schools and have safety seminars.
Thank you.
This one, I'm sorry. Sandy.
Do you not feel somewhat socially responsible in your business plan that when you come into a community, that you could take some of these things? What Greg was talking about was possibly just bridging over those. If you're making communities responsible, you're going to be making money. You are obviously a business. What about mitigating some of these safety issues instead of being about the community?
Well, we think we are mitigating a lot of safety.
Well, putting fences up so kids can't get to school in a timely way, but they're going to have to walk another 2 miles, is not mitigating.
What would be your solution?
Putting first up bridges. You were saying that your fire trucks, that it's up to the community to provide those. It's not your responsibility. It would be more socially acceptable if you would take some of that responsibility.
We've already committed over $100 million in expenses that are put in legal agreements this company has with cities and counties. Cities and counties would have to pay. We are going to pay. We are going to underwrite all those costs for safety. The cities normally would have to pay because they're crossing our tracks. We are paying for the fencing that is going up. That's not going to be our choice. The FRA has recommendations on how to, quote, seal the corridor and make it safe. They will be the ones requiring us to put up fencing. Obviously, we want to do that because we want to protect people's lives, but we also want to make sure that there's no disruption in the travel. Ma'am, a road does not belong to the road. A road belongs to the state or the city or the county. We're not in the road building business.
But I guess I would just suggest the social responsibility of the current business commitment is to help communities do that. So they wouldn't have to build a road. But you would issue paperwork and let us maintain it, just like they're going to build new crossings. Maybe have to make it.
Well, I think you need to go look at the cost of building a road, especially a bridge. Thank you, sir.
She just brought up a very good point. We're not in the railroad building business yet. We're required to maintain your tracks and pay for the maintenance of it. I mean, there is kind of a controversy or a counterbalance to that. So I just throw that. If you have a suggestion.
I do have a suggestion. This is the way railroads across the country operate. When especially in a railroad like this one, which was built in the 1890s, before many of these towns were here, before many of these roads were built, it is private property. And cities want to build a road. We're very happy for them to go across the property. The reason is when that happens, you have to have a gate. That as a consequence of the desire to cross the road, you have to have certain safety factors. We did not request you cross the tracks, you did. And so there's a shared cost. We maintain part of it, the cities maintain part of it. This is the way it has been done, as far as I know, since railroads and cities grew around each other.
It's how we do it.
Let me just preface, I'm going to say it again. We're going into every crossing and we're paying for every single upgrade. We're not requiring any city to contribute any cost to any of those safety upgrades. We're making them totally brand new. The maintenance schedule on most crossings is about 5 to 8 years. So if you have a crossing in your town that is ready for maintenance next year or in 2 years, that's going to be gone and it's going to be held back for probably another 5 to 8 years.
So what level are you going to maintenance?
I'm sorry?
So what level are you going to maintenance? You said before that you weren't going to do those quiet. That's a big impact on this community. I mean, I'm a homeowner here, the value of my property, we don't have quiet zones, and you're expecting taxpayers, local taxpayers, to pay for that extra cost.
So as a consequence of the safety standards that the FRA will be requiring us to install in Florida DOT,
many of the intersections will be almost at or near quiet zone status. Let me reiterate, the Federal Railroad regulations do not put the burden of quiet zones on railroads. They put it on the towns that are within those railroads. That is the regulation. I cannot do the paperwork for a federally approved quiet zone. The quiet zone under federal regulations is a quality of life issue, so you don't have to sound a horn because people don't want to hear a horn. It's not a safety issue. With that said, we are taking that next step much further and paying for most of the infrastructure that's going to help those cities get to that status, should they choose to do so. And we're not requiring the taxpayers to do anything. It is their choice whether they want to do that.
It's not my choice that to bring the train to the west of all that anytime.
Well, we would probably not want to sound the horn either, but that's a federal regulation for us to do that.
The extra few dollars to get it to a quiet, to a full quiet zone.
In my opinion, we are.
But see, if there was a complete closed corridor in the areas where people are predominantly living, that in fact would take care of the quiet zone or not?
Well, she's asked if there were a complete closed corridor in a neighborhood, isn't that a quiet zone? But you still have a crossing. I mean, a corridor can be closed, but you still have a crossing. Fencing isn't a quiet zone. It's the gates, mechanisms at the crossing.
So closed corridor doesn't include, I guess I'm looking for a definition then too.
So a sealed corridor.
A sealed corridor, is that what it's
There's
called?
not even a definition in FRA guidelines of what a sealed corridor is. I think we all have a perception of what a sealed corridor should look like. But sealed doesn't mean sealed permanently. Sealed means that it's adequately protected. So, I mean, vehicles have to cross, and in some areas pedestrians have to cross. So it is sealed to the point where, except to that point where somebody needs to cross, and the gates and operate to let them go. Didn't answer your question, but I don't know.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Let me get this gentleman over here, Gary. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
So Rusty, the idea of, it's been recommended that the city do some engineering work to determine what it would cost to put in quiet zone. Yet, the city doesn't know yet what upgrades that all of Florida is planning to make to the intersection, so we have no basis for calculating what it would cost to go to quiet zone. When do you think we'll be getting information?
Yeah, that's a good
in
question.
terms of what you're doing to these intersections for quiet?
That's a good question, Don. Is Jim O'Connor here? Okay, good. So we're in the field. We have been in the field in the southern counties to do the diagnostic reviews of those crossings. Those public works directors in those counties have our reviews, or they're starting to get them now. So they're starting to get an idea of what the costs are going to be. We're going to start doing the diagnostic reviews in the northern counties probably in June. The last I heard, they'll be scheduled sometime in June, and that's when the cities will get notified of when our teams are coming through, and the public works director will be invited to attend with those teams, the engineering teams. It's not open to everybody because there's federal regulations about being on a corridor. You have to have steel-toed boots and hats and all that kind of. So, and permission, and there is such thing as railroad police. So, be careful. So, those diagnostic reviews will start here in the summer. I'm going to say the city's not behind the 8 ball. I think there's time for the city to figure out, and I advise the city to be cautious and patient to save money because the safety upgrades we'll be putting in, you need to know before you start pulling those triggers. So you'll have plenty of time to do that.
Mr. Zimmerman.
I know you're here to answer tough questions, so I can't tell you how appreciative I am. I have an understanding when I heard you say today, and I don't want to leave there with a misunderstanding, so I'm going to say out loud what I'm thinking, and then you can respond to it and correct it if I'm incorrect. I think for counties like Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, and Brevard, I really think it's self-evident that most of the effects of this are going to be negative. I think we should just agree that that's pretty much the case. It's great for Orlando, and it's great for the state of Florida, and it's great for Miami, but on balance, I think it would be silly to say that for us, it's a negative effect. So, given that, as a starting point, I think it's hard to deny that. I also heard you say that in order to get your loan from the federal government, the only reason there are any public hearings is because you have applied for some kind of financing from the federal government. And I conclude from that that the value of that financing must be very great. Otherwise, why would anyone bother doing this? I'm a businessman, I'm a real estate developer. Hey, I understand these things as well as you do. And so my question is this: when you say that there is that this is an entirely private thing, my question back to you is, if that's really true, why would any corporation go through all of this merely for the sake of some kind of public loan if private financing based on a sound financial plan was available at similar rates, similar interest rates, and similar terms? I suspect that the federal government is providing some kind of loan guarantee or some kind of subsidized rate that makes the value of that loan great enough that you would endure this type of thing.
The loan is valuable. It is not guaranteed, it is not subsidized. It is favorable because it has a favorable interest rate and has a long term.
That is a subsidy.
It is based, it is revenue neutral to the taxpayers. And so it is based on whatever the Treasury, long-term Treasury bill rate is. And the terms of the loan are much longer than you could get in private financing in terms of going to a bank. It's like borrowing money for a house. You have 35 years to pay this kind of loan off. You couldn't do that if you went to a traditional bank.
But isn't that a subsidy? If similar financing terms aren't available from a country company like Fortress or any other company, isn't it, and if they're only available from the federal government, isn't that a subsidy?
You can call it a subsidy, sir. I do not. It is being paid back with private funds based on revenue we bring in, and of course the operations of the system. No, it is not a subsidy. It is a very favorable loan term, no question about it, which is one of the reasons why we want to go after it. Yes, Commissioner. I was waiting for you.
On this point, we have to understand that you're saying it's not a subsidy doesn't make it not a subsidy.
No, he doesn't have to believe me. I don't have to believe him.
You just said that it wasn't a subsidy. So I just want to make it clear that you're saying so doesn't make it one. My understanding is that Fortress is taking loans out in the neighborhood of 8.75 to 9.5%. And you had said that the interest rate for this loan, the RIP loan, would be roughly 5.75%. So there's a 3% for 35 years. That is the subsidy, and that is incredibly valuable to your people, which is why you're going through this process. And the fact that it then is, since it's a federal loan, that we basically privatize the potential benefits if there are there, but we put the risk on the backs of the taxpayers. So that's not speculation or anything. That much is basically fact, and that's where we see, I think people in the neighboring counties see the difference from the way it's being explained to us by your
Commissioner, your facts are wrong. We are not putting the taxpayers at risk. This is a fully collateralized loan. And if the FRA and the independent financial analyst decide it's not, then we won't get the loan. But if this project fails, taxpayers aren't paying for it, we're losing our assets.
Well, again, without having full details of the collateralization, which we had long discussions about yesterday, so it's still very opaque. We can't say that. I'll just go back again to the fact that the federal government allowed all sorts of loans prior to the financial collapse in 2007, 2008. And people, bankers, I'm sure that Mr. Hartman's been banker, would attest to the fact that all the regulations were followed, but the federal government at the end of the day came in and picked up and paid billions and billions of dollars to get us out of that financial mess. So again, the risk in that case was on the taxpayer, and in this case, again, the risk is on the taxpayer.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to point out on this financing and the collateralization and the private money that you're backing it, that this has been done all of this century, over 100 years in this country, in our hospitals, in our private schools, in all sorts of institutions have financing that our federal government, our citizens, have put in place so that infrastructure, people that want to take the entrepreneurial spirit to build that, have an opportunity on a 30 or 40-year method. Cook County Hospital, many hospitals in Nashville, Vanderbilt University, all kinds of things have the exact same financing available to them. And they have been fully collateralized by their institutions, by their structure, by their backers. This is not something that Florida country created it with our votes. I think that the financing that they're taking is not something that they created, it's something that we made available to continue the economic development of our country.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Bob.
I just want to close and say that, I talked about the fact that this is a private venture. First venture of this kind in many decades in this country. Florida has been trying to get some sort of high-speed rail system or intercity passenger rail system since the 80s. I've been involved, because I've worked in politics since then, in state and federal government. Amtrak, this community, the communities south of here, north of here, have been trying to get Amtrak to come to this community. A private company steps in to put their own assets at risk and try to do something that hasn't been done in this period for a long time that will eventually serve more, at least a third of this state, eventually serve this entire coast and other parts of the state. And what I'm hearing is that you're not approving of some sort of private entrepreneurial venture is actually quite interesting to me. So either want passenger rail service in this state, you want other opportunities to get around, or by a private company willing to risk its assets, or you want a taxpayer-funded version, which was what was proposed a couple of years ago between Orlando and Tampa, that was $2.5 billion for 90 miles. And this is about that, a little less than that, for 235 miles. I think you have to weigh you have to ask yourselves, what do we want in the state? Maybe you don't want anything. Maybe you want to stay in your cars. But if this is unsuccessful, you're probably not going to see a system in this country for many, many decades. And if you do, it'll be public financed. And if you have a problem with a public subsidized passenger system, then you're going to really have a problem with that.
As Bill O'Reilly says, you got the last word. Listen, thank you all for being here. I think these kinds of forums are very important to inform our citizens of very important topics. This is a great topic. Thanks for being here, and thank you all for coming. Meeting's adjourned.